Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first event in our new three-part virtual event series, Writing the Path, Securing Global COVID-19 Vaccine Equity. My name is Ingrid Katz, and I'm the Associate Faculty Director at the Harvard Global Health Institute, and we're so happy to welcome you here today. As COVID-19 continues to ravage populations around the world, vast and ongoing inequities in vaccine rollout have made clear the urgent need for global vaccine equity. In view of this issue, the Harvard Global Health Institute has partnered with Ariadne Labs and the Harvard Center for AIDS Research to elevate an evidence-based response to the challenges of equitable global vaccine allocation and distribution. This series aims to foster dialogue between global experts about the overarching challenges to securing global COVID-19 vaccine equity, tangential threats to vaccine distribution, including vaccine hesitancy, and approaches for correcting early failures that have already led to inequitable vaccine distribution. This first webinar, Promoting Vaccine Equity, a global perspective on COVID-19 vaccine distribution, convenes global experts to lay the groundwork for understanding the current scope of the vaccine distribution crisis and the historical relevance of its challenges. This is just the first of many conversations around global vaccine equity, and we're thrilled to have such fantastic speakers with us today. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping notes. This video is being streamed through Zoom, and a recording will be made available on the Harvard Global Health Institute website afterwards. We'll be running a live Q&A towards the end of the panel discussion today. So we have enabled the Ask a Question feature on the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions during the webinar, just pop them in there, and we'll do our best to answer them during the Q&A portion. We've also enabled the chat function. Please make sure you set your message recipient, and we have my colleague, Luke, here from the Harvard Global Health Institute, who will be overseeing it. Please make sure you set your message recipient as everyone and not just the panelists. So to get us all started, we'd like to invite all of our participants to use the chat functionality to let us know where you are connecting from today. I'm calling in from Massachusetts, Cambridge, the United States. And with that, let me introduce you to our wonderful keynote speaker today. Dr. Richard Mahego is a senior public health specialist with over 25 years of experience in designing, implementing, and evaluating disease control programs. Dr. Mahego currently serves as the Immunization and Vaccines Development Coordinator at the World Health Organization Regional Office for Africa. In this role, he is responsible for coordinating technical expertise in support of the planning, monitoring, and evaluation of member states' immunization programs. This includes vaccine introduction, policy development, regulatory standardization, and research. Further, Dr. Mahego leads the IVD program in advocacy, communication, and resource mobilization. This includes supporting member states in establishing and strengthening partner coordination mechanisms at national and bilateral levels and coordinating resource mobilization efforts for national immunization programs. It is such a pleasure to have you here today, Dr. Mahego. I will hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Ingrid, for this wonderful introduction. And I would like, first of all, to thank the Harvard Global Health Institute for the invitation extended to WHO and myself for this opportunity. And I would like to use some of the few slides to kickstart this introduction. And by, first of all, greetings all the participants who have tuned in to this interesting debate. I've seen we have a wonderful panel this morning or afternoon, depending on where we are. So I'm currently connecting from Brazzaville, Republic of Congo in Central Africa. where our headquarters from WHO are based. So I'm trying to share my slide. Here we go. So we are going to have definitely, I'm sure, a very exciting conversation around promoting vaccine equity and to hear different perspectives on this panel, I think will help advance this issue. Let me start by saying that when it comes to vaccine introduction across the world, I think we have seen a different development with close to now 3 months where high-income countries have already started to vaccinate their population, whereby in low-income countries, vaccination have just started a couple of days ago. When we are talking about equity, I think this is something quite very important. Close to 300 million of vaccine doses that have been distributed globally, and only a very tiny portion of these vaccines being used in low-income countries. If we looked at the number of countries, only 3 low-income countries have introduced so far COVID-19 vaccine, as opposed to 65 high-income countries. The vaccine, when we looked at the percentage of introduction in different groups where vaccination has started, again, the low-income countries represent only 10% of even within that portion of low-income countries where vaccination have started. I think this is really a call for a global reflection, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to be part of this group to discuss how we can equitably distribute the vaccine across the world. This map sums it quite very well. When we looked at the other part of the world where vaccination have started, whereby in Africa, where the majority of low-income countries, as well as Southeast Asia, vaccination is really lagging behind. Reason for that are many. It's, as we know, the vaccines for COVID-19 have been developed at a very rapid speed. Most of the doses were pre-ordered by high-income countries, and low-income countries find themselves without access to the vaccine. The COVAX facility, and we will discuss that later on, which is an initiative, a global initiative that has been launched by WHO and other partners, have tried actually to come to fill the gap of this vaccine inequity across the world. We have a very, let's say, difficult experience in the past, and I would like to recall most of the issues that low-income countries went through during the H1N1 pandemic in 2008 and 2009, where low-income countries really didn't get vaccine until almost the pandemic was over. We were lucky enough at that time where the H1N1 pandemic was not as virulent like what we are going through with COVID-19. WHO has come up with a roadmap on prioritizing the use of vaccines equitably in the context of low supply situation. But we have seen that in this document, we have tried to highlight what could potentially be the approach in an environment where we have limited supply to provide vaccine equitably to everybody across the world. And our motto has been to make sure that few people can get vaccine everywhere at the same time in the world, rather than few people in few countries getting vaccine. And this is the situation, unacceptable situation we are in for the moment. When we looked at the countries that have started to vaccinate, we have seen that particularly in low-income countries, for those who are using COVAX facility doses, healthcare workers have been prioritized, which is quite a very good development. As of today, 25 countries have received COVAX vaccine across Africa and Southeast Asia. And most of these countries have prioritized healthcare workers as the group number 1 to receive the vaccine. And there is a reason for that. We have seen particularly data on the African continent where population, particularly healthcare workers, are disproportionately affected by the disease compared to the general population. Sometimes the population, healthcare workers are going to their duties without even basic protective equipment. So the vaccination of this particular high-risk group, I think, is quite of paramount importance if really we need to maintain the health system in country functioning, but at the same time to make sure that we have people who can take care of those who are going to come to visit the health facility in a different condition. So what is COVAX? COVAX have tried to fill this equity gap that we have seen since the beginning of the pandemic. It is an initiative that has been launched by WHO, working with other partners. And I would like here to discuss mainly the vaccine part of it, the COVAX, which is the vaccine pillar of the access to COVID-19 tool accelerator. This is an initiative that's meant to provide not only vaccines, but also therapeutics as well as diagnostics to deal with COVID-19 pandemic. So when it comes to vaccine in particular, this vaccine pillar called again COVAX, the initiative was meant to provide up to 2 billion of vaccine doses to low-income countries, but not necessarily only low-income countries, but also all the other countries that can come together to pool the resources together so that we can avoid individual competition in this race of vaccines that we are now seeing across the globe. So the objective really of the COVAX facility is to provide not only vaccine to the most deprived population, but to make sure that there is also an equitable distribution of vaccine across the countries. And I think this is why I would like exactly to insist on the equitable distribution on the vaccine and a fair distribution of those. So when we looked at the number of doses that are in the pipeline for the COVAX facility, we are seeing that so far close to 1.3 billion of vaccine doses have been secured. But when I'm talking about the securing vaccine, these vaccines have yet to reach to the population in the country that needs them most. We are expecting that by the end of the year, 2021, we'll reach the 2 billion doses that are needed. There have been an extraordinary global solidarity to raise resources to make sure that a country, particularly those who cannot afford the vaccine, can be supported to reach their population with this life-saving vaccine. To conclude, I would like to just give you few reflections on some of the challenges that countries are currently facing in accessing vaccine, even when these vaccines are supplied for free through COVAX. We have seen in this particular deployment, new approaches that have been put in place, vaccine manufacturing requesting country to indemnify and to sign liability agreement with them. This is something new that we have seen in the history of vaccination. And it has created some tension in countries where countries don't understand why they should sign such a very stringent agreement with vaccine manufacturers. We are also in a situation where as vaccine become available after clinical trial, they are rolled out quite very quickly to reach everybody. And the regulatory pathway for utilizing such products are quite complicated, and countries are relying more on WHO through their emergency use listing process to make sure that the vaccine have been evaluated, particularly those countries that do not have enough resources through their national regulatory authorities to register the vaccine themselves. This is just a few gallery pictures of the excitement that have spread across Africa the last 2 weeks when the first doses of vaccine have started to land in Africa. So I'd like Ingrid to conclude by saying that during this conversation, we are looking to 2 or 3 major things. First of all, how do we share ideas on how we can accelerate the distribution of the vaccine in particularly communities that are very not wealthy. Secondly, how we can fight the issue of vaccine hesitancy and particularly miscommunication around that. And I hope we'll have the opportunity to discuss this during this panel. And then lastly, I hope we can agree on what key drivers we can put forward to make sure that the countries that are holding vaccine, that have vaccine in excess, can also share this vaccine with countries or territories that need them more. So I'm looking forward to the discussion this morning, and thank you very much, Ingrid.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mahego, for your thoughtful reflection on the current global challenges to equitable COVID-19 vaccine distribution. Such a critical conversation, and we're so looking forward to continuing as we move on to our moderated panel discussion. So to our attendees, we encourage you to ask questions again via the Q&A feature throughout the panel, and we will be devoting the last 10 minutes or so to answering audience questions. So please put any questions you have into the Q&A. At this time, I would like to introduce our speakers. Sephora Abdul Karim is a public health lawyer and senior researcher at the South African Medical Research Council Center for Health Economics and Decision Science at the Wits School of Public Health. She is also a 2020 Aspen New Voices Fellow. Ms. Abdul Karim is also a member of the Africa CDC African Vaccine Delivery Alliance, which aims to support the rollout of a COVID-19 vaccine across the continent. Ms. Abdul Karim has written on a number of issues concerning COVID-19 and law, including affordability of the COVID-19 vaccine, the effects of criminalizing COVID-19 transmission on testing efforts, and the role of human rights during the COVID-19 pandemic. We're thrilled to have you here. Our second speaker is Dr. Emmanuel Martin. He's the Medical Innovation and Access Policy Advisor for the Médecins Sans Frontières Access Campaign based in Geneva. The Access Campaign works to change government policies and pharmaceutical industry practices to ensure that effective drugs, tests, and vaccines are available, affordable, and suitable for people across the globe. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, Dr. Martin was closely following policy developments at the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, or CEPI. And since the start of the pandemic, he has focused on access, research, and development issues surrounding future COVID-19 vaccines. We're so thrilled to have you. Our third speaker is Tian Johnson. They are the founder and head of the African Alliance. Tian is a queer African activist and member of the South African Ministerial Advisory Committee on COVID-19 vaccines. An Aspen 2021 New Voices Fellow, they are also a founding member of the Vaccine Advocacy Resource Group, a global group of advocates working to ensure that vaccine research is accountable, transparent, and community-owned. Tian serves as the International Civil Society Observer of the Robert Carr Fund and is the GBV Expert Advisor to the Hands Off 2 program, which works to reduce violence against sex workers in South Africa, Botswana, Mozambique, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. In 2021, Tian joined the African CDC COVID-19 African Vaccine Delivery Alliance, tasked with the rapid deployment of more than 600 million initial doses of the COVID-19 vaccines across the continent. So happy to welcome you here today. And lastly, our moderator, Dr. Louise Ivers, is the Executive Director of the Massachusetts General Hospital Center for Global Health and a Professor of Medicine at Harvard Medical School. She is a practicing infectious diseases physician at MGH, where she is currently the interim chief of the Division of Infectious Diseases. Dr. Ivers works on the design, implementation, and evaluation of large-scale public health programs in resource-limited settings with the goal of achieving health equity. Dr. Ivers previously served as clinical director and then chief of mission for Partners in Health in Haiti. In this role, she designed and implemented HIV and TB programs and led responses to the major earthquake in Haiti in 2010 and a subsequent cholera outbreak. From 2015 to 2017, Dr. Ivers served as a member of the executive leadership team at Partners in Health, working on global strategic implementation. Dr. Ivers is also involved in global policy and advocacy work to improve health equity. And with that, I will hand the mic over to Dr. Ivers, who will be leading our discussion today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Katz. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation with our panelists. We all have had a chance to meet beforehand, and we've decided we're going to have this conversation like old friends. So we'll be passing for everyone to make their comments and then having some discussion. I do want to reflect just for a minute on my positionality here. I'm sitting in my office at Massachusetts General Hospital, which is a Harvard teaching hospital and one of the most resourced hospitals, certainly in the state, probably in the country. And I'm just within a couple of miles of where a lot of intellectual property is being held around the vaccines we now have available and for use, with pharmaceutical company across the river, another large teaching hospital just down the city. So I think it's really important for us to mention that within my colleagues here at Mass General, we have really been outraged and frustrated and concerned about the fact that we have access to vaccines and so many of our global partners do not. It seems unconscionable that healthcare workers are not even yet being protected in so many countries. So standing on the shoulders of about 400 of my colleagues, we have signed a letter, written a letter and call to action around this. And I'm looking forward to learning from the panelists about other ways that we can be advocates. So with that, I'm going to promptly pass the microphone to Sephora, Abdul, Karim, and welcome your comments to the audience. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having me join what I think is an absolutely critical conversation. And thank you for also making this a truly global panel that speaks to issues in the African region, that speaks to issues in wealthy countries, because I think there's been a tendency to almost separate and silo the issues that are happening in high-income countries from those that are happening in low-income countries, when the reality is that equitable vaccine access is really critical to ending the global pandemic. This is not something that each country can approach on its own. And I think it was very, significant, the map that Dr. Mahego shared, where you see that most countries who have access to vaccine have done so through bilateral agreements, including South Africa, where I am currently sitting. And a lot of those bilaterals are fueling vaccine nationalism, and that's leading to vaccine scarcity across the world. There isn't a reason or there isn't a shortage of vaccine doses per se. That means that certain countries should still be sitting without a vaccine. But really what we've seen is in March, April, May last year, lots of wealthy countries were able to secure preferential and in certain instances exclusive access to vaccine candidates, really to the exclusion of everybody else. And now that some countries have oversubscribed, 5-9 times their population with vaccine, are able to vaccinate their populations 5 times over, we haven't really seen a willingness to let some of those doses go and, for example, help the COVAX facility to secure the doses they need. I remember when I first looked at the COVAX initiative, which I think is in about August or September last year, was really a shining beacon of what would address vaccine inequity, and we all thought that would be the solution. Somebody had pointed out that if COVAX vaccinated all the populations that were seeking to join, they would be vaccinating 60% of the world. And yet you can see just how many doses have been secured. And that's because bilaterals have really bought up most of the doses. And so I think as we think about vaccine equity, it's really critical to sort of recognize that it's a multifaceted issue. And I think Dr. Mahego's sort of challenges really address some of those. Obviously, I'm a lawyer, so I think about the legal issues, and I see them as kind of almost 3 or 4-fold. The first is that the way that the research and development and the R&D and trialing and testing of vaccines operated, it didn't even follow basic Syracuse principles where you would have seen post-trial access for participants. So for example, South Africa, relatively wealthy compared to our neighbors, we were able to run vaccine trials, and yet even the people who participated in those trials could not get access if they had received the placebo, which is a problem in and of itself. However, the second problem is around these bilateral agreements. South Africa was supposed to be getting doses through COVAX, but in the end, due partly to pressure, due partly to the fact that there were delays in rolling out through COVAX, South Africa pursued its own bilaterals. That's why our country is blue on that map, and we have been able to exploit that relative power to the exclusion of many of our neighbors. That's why we had vaccine doses being rolled on in like January, February, when our neighbors, some of them still don't have doses. And then I think the final thing, which I just wanted to talk about, was this idea of regulatory approval. And Dr. Mahego raised it as there's a need to expedite and streamline regulatory approval. And a lot of people kind of overlook that. But we saw in late last year, a lot of countries expedited regulatory approval of vaccines that had not received phase 3 results, that were effectively unproven, in order to roll it out among their countries much faster and not have to compete with others. So what we've seen is a convergence of different factors that countries have used to protect their own to the exclusion of others. And so I think going forward, what's really needed is a global view to say everybody needs this vaccine. What can we do to make that a reality? So thank you. I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you so much. Let me turn now to Dr. Emmanuel Martin for your comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Louise. So there are too many topics to try and reflect on in just a 5-minute introductory remark. Of course, many positives from the unprecedented speed of COVID-19 vaccine development. Also, the crucial foundational R&D work done overwhelmingly by public and philanthropically funded initiatives such as CEPI. And of course, also the leadership of the World Health Organization in calling for true global equitable vaccine access, as demonstrated, I think, most notably by Mike Ryan and Tedros's various interventions. But instead of speaking on these, I want to focus on 2 things that I think we didn't do very well, that I think have not been covered extensively yet, because I think they deserve attention, and they are where we as a global community have the greatest potential for improvement. And the first one is transparency. While things have moved at unprecedented speeds, this core tenet of public trust, collaboration, and accountability seems to have been forgotten. All of the bilateral contracts between countries and companies, or indeed the COVAX facility, are shrouded in secrecy. Most of the prices that are being paid for different vaccines are unknown. The production costs of these vaccines are not made publicly available. And given the billions of dollars in public funding invested into the development, we have no idea what rights, if any, governments have secured with respect to access, pricing, supply, etc. And it's only thanks to the tireless work of journalists that we know about, for instance, the unjustifiable Oxford-AstraZeneca pricing discrepancy between the EU and South Africa or Uganda, where the EU is actually paying a lower price for the same vaccine, despite the very public promises of not-for-profit production. And the only reason we know that Pfizer is holding South American countries to ransom by requiring complete immunity, even in cases of gross negligence or fraud, and asking countries to even put up sovereign assets as collateral, is the great work of the Bureau of Investigative Journalists. And now, while we owe these journalists, I think, a great deal of praise, this isn't the way we should be doing things. Secrecy and opacity undermine public trust in vaccines. They undermine the credibility of global solidarity efforts such as COVAX, and should have no place in pandemic response efforts. Narrow commercial or indeed narrow political interests should not take precedence over the principle of transparency. We have to do better moving forward. And second, I think we need to acknowledge that we in the West and in global health institutions hugely underestimated the capacity, expertise, capabilities, and political importance of institutions in so-called developing countries. We did this when we focused on the vaccine development race only on Western companies, and we're doing it right now when it comes to scaling up and scaling out of manufacturing capacity. I think to illustrate this point, the producers on the continent of Asia have so far produced and delivered the most doses worldwide, only followed by North America and Europe. Over 2/3 of the doses low and middle income countries have received to date have come from these producers. So why have, with a few notable exceptions, Western companies prioritized European and North American supply chains and heavily relied on the traditional monopoly-based contract manufacturing model? Why has not a single mRNA vaccine producer accepted offers from developing country manufacturers to produce their vaccines and receive technology transfer? Was it just that relying on traditional partners was comfortable and familiar and fast? I would argue, and this may be a bit controversial, that to some extent this reflects antiquated colonial views of non-Western countries and their capabilities and capacities. And to some degree, of course, also the feverish desire to maintain lucrative monopolies. So I think moving forward and knowing that attention towards pandemic preparedness drops rapidly the moment a threat is no longer immediate in high-income countries, we need to first ensure that promising technology platforms, such as the mRNA platform, are transferred to developing countries and that manufacturing capacities are further expanded, especially on the continent of Africa. And I believe that this is a crucial area where actually high-income country governments have a role to play to support both financially and politically this area of work. I'll stop here and I really look forward to the Q&A.
Great, thank you so much. And now I'll pass to Tian Johnson. Looking forward to your comments too.
Thanks so much, Louise, and thanks so much to everyone for having us. You know, I think when we think of equity, we need to distinguish between what equity looks like in getting vaccine doses into a country, and then what equity looks like getting those vaccines into arms. But as we've discussed and have these discussions, it's important to also reflect on a few hard truths. At the current trajectory, vaccination to prevent transmission will take more than 5 years. Part of that is attributable to countries that stand in the way of equity, and so we need to call out the US, we need to call out the UK, we need to call out the EU, Japan, Switzerland, Canada, and others who have for over 4 months now been material barriers to equity, all this time whilst hoarding vaccines. And while that is happening, we have the admirable attempts of COVAX, which is on track to achieve 1/4 of its targets. It's vastly underfunded, it's compromised by the hoarding of wealthy countries, and it does not work to increase the global productive capacity of vaccines. But COVAX remains an unelected, unaccountable body that many leaders are using as a deflection tool from them filling their obligations to their people in terms of equitable access. COVAX does not represent, even distantly, what we want to see for equity. It is an interim measure that comes with its own challenges as it strong arms desperate countries to fall in line with their conditions or be left out. So then we are left to ask, why aren't we in Africa manufacturing our own COVID-19 vaccines? Firms across the world, including South Africa, have said time and time again that they stand ready to manufacture if IP restrictions did not stand in their way. So we come back to saying that every leader, every citizen of the US, the UK, the EU, Japan, Switzerland, Canada, who are not raising their voices to their governments to end this apartheid is complicit in keeping this pandemic alive and keeping our graveyards full. It is short-sighted, it is selfish, and it is genocidal that we are allowing pharma to rub their blood-soaked hands in anticipation of $38 billion of profit this year alone in a global pandemic, off the back of an estimated $100 billion in public funds that made the research and development possible. Earlier this year, when I spoke to a senior health official and asked why we were paying excessive amounts for COVID vaccines, I was told that developed countries made investments into the research. But we in South Africa, for example, also made investments. We volunteered our bodies in the trials. We used our public universities to do the research. We built community goodwill to ensure that the research happens. So what do we say today, and Sephora touched on this, to trial participants who have made these sacrifices and yet they see those in wealthy countries being vaccinated, with them and their very own families' vaccination a distant prospect? What do we expect to tell these communities when we go back to them for support for research for the next pandemic? What happened to the principles shaping post-trial access? And what does all of this mean for vaccine hesitancy when we finally do get the vaccines? So as we enter another year of pharma greed, dividing the world along the lines of wealth and vaccine access, procuring vaccines at 2 to 3 times the cost of first world countries, of our governments paralyzed by non-disclosure agreements, of historically frail healthcare systems, hoping to fall in line with overbearing COVAX conditions, and for perhaps Canada to send us their leftovers, we need to be clear. As global solidarity works its way through this pipe dream of global health, with the aim of leaving no one behind, we need to face the reality that unless we meaningfully stand up to and sanction pharmaceutical companies and threaten their bottom lines in country, and continue to expose their efforts to lobby for sanctions on countries who are trying to issue compulsory licenses for COVID-19 vaccines, colleagues, the future looks bleak. Manuel also spoke about the NDAs. What does this mean when we can't hold our leaders accountable in country because we're told we signed a non-disclosure agreement? We want to know what courage, if any, did you as our leader have when you were negotiating in that boardroom? We might never know because they have been silenced. And what does it mean when public office bearers are silenced by pharma? So we need to start looking inward to bodies like the African Union and the African CDC that has done significant work and represents one of our most promising hopes for access and equity through the framework for fair allocation of vaccines that is in place, that was developed by the African Union and the Africa CDC. With a focus on building vaccine confidence at community level in the absence of supply, these structures have been set up to deliver 750 vaccines to 750 million people on a scale equivalent to India or China that represents 1.5 billion doses. This is a platform where member states can view what vaccines have been allocated, and these vaccines have been allocated based on the proportion of their population. So colleagues, we cannot pin our hopes on the charity of wealthy countries who refuse to see our humanity or the moral logic of true solidarity. So as I get back to my life as an African, in a continent that makes up nearly 18% of the world's population, but only 1.5% of COVID-19 vaccination, I want to leave you with these words from the head of UNAIDS, Winnie Byanyimya. What we see today is a stampede, the survival of the fittest approach, where those with the deepest pockets, with the sharpest elbows, are grabbing what is there and leaving others to die. Thank you, Louise.
Yeah, thank you. So grateful for all of your comments, and there's so many different things to dive into. I do want to come back to COVAX to talk about it as a mechanism and kind of pick at it a little bit to see if that's really a way forward. But I'd love to spend a few minutes thinking about vaccine production, and each of you touched on this in various ways. One thing I think is true in global health, or the dream of global health, is that we accept scarcity as though it's a natural order. And I do think this is part of a colonial legacy of a status quo that puts us in this binary notion that some countries are poor and don't have, and others do, as if it's a natural order. And if we could potentially disrupt the concept that that vaccine is scarce, it would help in many ways get us into at least allocations that would then bring us more like into country level distributions. I'd love to maybe go back to Sephora first as a lawyer in helping us think through some of the regulatory and legal issues and then also your hopes or thinking about production of vaccine on the continent of Africa as are being produced in Asia and other places. And just we'll go to each panelist, and Richard also, if you're still with us here, would love to think about this with you too. So let's start with Sephora on that.
I think it's such an important issue because, you know, kind of issues of affordability and accessibility of biomedical interventions is not a new thing. It's been an issue for decades, if not centuries. And in the early 2000s, there was this huge push to make medicines more affordable. And a lot of the interventions that were introduced to make medicines more affordable were kind of almost predicated, or their success required that there was a sufficient supply of these drugs, typically produced in low and middle income countries. And it's how South Africa, for example, was able to negotiate very affordable prices for antiretrovirals, because there were enough suppliers in low and middle income countries who we could buy generics from if we needed to. And I think that was one of the big things when people were thinking about making a COVID-19 vaccine affordable. A lot of those measures didn't work because there wasn't the same kind of manufacturing capacity. However, and I think that's so important what Manuel and Tian have spoken about, which is it's not like there's no manufacturing capacity, and in low and middle income countries, it's just not quite at the same level. And it is true, a lot of these vaccines require quite specialized manufacturing capacity. There's quite a lot of technical know-how that needs to be transferred and shared. And so I think while the first year of COVID-19 has been defined by the scarcity of the vaccine, the next years are going to really be defined by how much people are willing to put aside IP monopolies, to put aside hoarding of and secrecy around trade secrets and technical know-how, and really pledge and turn those words of a COVID-19 vaccine as a public good into a reality. And so my final comment is just to highlight that, you know, there's currently a waiver application at the World Trade Organization that's being led by India and South Africa, and it's facing active opposition from many of the countries that Tian mentioned. These are all countries that already have large numbers of vaccines, and they're actively trying to prevent poorer countries from empowering themselves to get those vaccine doses. So I'll leave it for the other panelists to take it further, but those are kind of just my preliminary thoughts on this issue.
Thank you. Manuel, MSF Access Campaign works on a lot of these issues for other diseases. Insulin is 100 years old and people don't have access to insulin in many places. How much profit is enough? How can we put continued pressure on pharmaceutical industry, on our governments? How can we support this movement? And what are your thoughts on this production capacity?
Well, I would broadly agree with what Sephora and Tian have already said. I think the question of how much is enough, we all have to ask ourselves. I think we heard a lot about the two developers of the now Pfizer vaccine, but originally it's the BioNTech vaccine. From both of them are now on the Forbes list. They're in the top 100 richest people in the world. The question I think everyone needs to ask themselves, you know, is this enough? Shouldn't we now hand over the technical know-how, the intellectual property, etc., to others so that we can not just only respond to this pandemic, but also future pandemics where, again, the mRNA platform holds significant promises there. And it actually doesn't require necessarily vaccine manufacturing capacity to produce, which is one of the very interesting things about that platform. And what we've been seeing the last few months is that you can really transfer the know-how if you want to in astonishingly quick time, somewhere between 3 and 6 months. But you need the political will to do it. And I think that's where countries that have invested into the research and development behind these platforms should really leverage that investment and try and force this. I think there's that legal route. Then, and to the point that Tian made, I do think that the contributions which are significant from developing countries to the research and development, but aren't always financial, such as the contribution to clinical trials, that should come with strings attached, not only for the people participating in the clinical trials, but for everyone in the region. And I think this is something that we have seen really not happen, unfortunately, with respect to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in particular, where South Africa not only was involved in testing this vaccine, but is actually contributing to producing 300 million doses. And when then the South African government asks to get 20 million doses, they're told no, and they can only have 11. I mean, that's a ridiculous scenario. No high-income country would accept that. So I think there's a number of different things that countries can do and should do, but unfortunately haven't done yet, in particular on this issue of manufacturing.
Thanks, Tian. As an activist, you know, it's so important to hear from you. And you know, one of the challenges I think has been that last spring we heard a lot of talk about global solidarity from many European leaders. We did not hear it in the US at that time, but the new administration has talked about global solidarity. But we see this public action or this public discourse, but different private actions, and the backdoor secret, you know, activities. How do you think we can keep pushing on that, especially as it goes, as it relates to this issue of intellectual property, trade secrets, the issues that we're talking about here about increasing production to try to decrease that part of the scarcity conversation?
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I think we need to increasingly keep the spotlight on the profits that pharma makes in country, you know, and whether that looks like a boycott or whether that looks like continuously spotlighting the inequity issues that is fueled by pharma, that needs to happen. In terms of manufacturing, our manufacturer here in South Africa called BioVac, which is partially owned by government, have said, you know, they're ready to manufacture up to 30 million doses a year. But of course, we also know that they're in talks with pharma, but we don't know what they're talking to pharma about because they will not disclose it, because everywhere you look, there's a non-disclosure agreement. And so what does that mean for very basic principles of democracy and accountability and citizens being able to hold those in power to account when there's this constant veil of secrecy? And so I think while that level of secrecy has been pretty stifling in this pandemic, I think it does point to the urgency for activists to mobilize and to strategize, to continue keeping the pressure on and keeping the spotlight on these issues that they would otherwise not like to be highlighted. So I think it's really, really important. And I mean, it's tragic. You know, it's tragic that we're now really taking serious our potential for increased manufacturing capacity. We shouldn't be having this discussion in a pandemic. So if anything that has come out of COVID has taught us, it's that we need to prepare urgently for the next pandemic so we don't rely on charity of countries that don't see our humanity.
Thank you. Richard, I think you're still there with us, and if not, I'll hear some silence, I suppose, but I wanted to turn, oh great, thank you. I wanted to turn to you for a minute, both on this question of production, but maybe to pivot and spend a little time talking about COVAX as a facility. You know, we've heard some of the positives about it, but it was intended for people to be all in and countries to be all in. And so we see, even say in the US where I am, a commitment of $4 billion over the next couple of years to COVAX, and yet hedging the bets, buying all the vaccine bilaterally, having way more doses on hand in theory than we actually even have humans who need them. What's your perspective on COVAX as a future way forward for this? Should we be all in to just make it better, or should we go in a different direction? And I'd love to ask that question to everyone, but start with you on that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Louise, for that. Two things. Maybe before speaking about COVAX, and I think I would like to echo some of the comment made by the different panelists, and maybe talked about one or two things. Before even talking about vaccine production, I think we may also want to discuss the issue of the how do we get the public health priority right? So if we are in a region like this, but it's not only for Africa, I think it's also in many other parts of the world, Latin America, Southeast Asia. Do the current research really based on the public health priorities, or just based on return in investment, and then see what could be the return on that. So if we looked at diseases like malaria that has been around for decades, which is still claiming a lot of lives in this continent, and we looked at the fundamental research around that, TB, to come up with a more improved vaccine around that, without maybe mentioning HIV, and we can name it. So I think this pandemic should also remind us that the public health priority and research are not all the time matching, and to respond really to the need of the people. We saw that in the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. It's when really the first case of Ebola reached the US or other developed countries that really the world came to fight Ebola. So I think it's a real issue at the center of equity globally. And for vaccine production and capacity, I think Sephora and others mentioned it very well. It's not that people cannot do that, but I think we need to get to a point where transfer of technology should not be a charitable thing. It should be something that will also contribute to the global good. And we are seeing it now. So if we are not vaccinating many people, the new variants will come and maybe just put all the efforts for high-income country back to square one. So I think this is something we need to continue to reflect. Now, going back to the issue of COVAX, COVAX was exactly meant to change that dynamic. The idea that what we went through during H1N1 pandemic should not repeat, that less developed countries should not be at the back of the queue. How do we prioritize vaccine distribution globally, such a way that we worked on a global recovery rather than we mentioned vaccine nationalism, trying to see what will work best for one. So I think the promise of the COVAX facility were really meant to solve and to provide responses to those issues. But unfortunately, we saw that though a country like, and we are very happy to see the US now back to WHO, but also back contributing to the COVAX, the European Union as well, while they are all now members of COVAX, but we see that the same country are also doing these bilateral deals. That at the end of the day is weakening the COVAX facility promises. So I think we have even seen India, that is mainly producing vaccine for COVAX, now going to supply the more developed country on vaccine for the same country that can also use their own reserve. So it's really the things going ups down. I think we have got to get our priority right as a global community. We've got to get our vision together as a global community. And unless people are protected, people are vaccines are distributed equitably elsewhere, we're not going to get the end of this thing. So these are the promise that COVAX was supposed to mean, but at least it has given a new boost with the first delivery that we are starting seeing now rolling out across the world.
Thank you. I'd love to turn to the rest of the panelists on this question of COVAX, and maybe Sephora to you. And I've heard some discussion here already about even within the facility of COVAX, the countries are having to sign special agreements, and Tian touched on this too, but can you tell us a little more about that and your perspective on COVAX?
So I think when I first heard about COVAX and when it was really gaining traction, I think many people were reluctant to criticize it too heavily, because at the time it was kind of our only option to get equitable vaccine access. And I think, you know, immediately the criticism I have is that for me, there's a big difference between vaccine equality and vaccine equity. The fact that South Africa is paying the same for our participation in COVAX as many other wealthy countries that are also using COVAX or participating in COVAX is not equitable, because our GDP is not comparable. And yet that is the situation with COVAX. And I think Tian hit on so many of the important issues around lack of transparency, vertical governance structures. I will say that, you know, the predecessor to COVAX, the pneumococcal advanced market commitment, was incredibly important and incredibly successful in not only getting the pneumococcal vaccine over the development finish line, but also really expediting access to that vaccine in very lower and lower middle income countries. But I think going forward, I'm not 100% sure that COVAX is necessarily the only answer anymore. And Tian kind of alluded to this, which is the African Medical Supply Platform is an African Union created and really African owned vaccine access portal that many countries are able to procure vaccines through at affordable prices. And a lot of countries have even where they have excess doses or extra doses that they can't use, like for example, South Africa is unable to use AstraZeneca due to our variant. We sold those doses to the platform. And so that platform was able to start rolling out doses, I believe in February, if I'm not mistaken. And so I think what the future looks like is not that it's going to be COVAX or nothing, but rather that it's going to be an amalgamation of regionally led initiatives and COVAX. And that's really what's going to change the landscape, is an amalgamation of things, not just one solution. And I think that's really what we want and where there's more options, I think people are more empowered as well. So I think that's sort of my initial thoughts about it.
Thanks, Manuel. I'm European, you're European. You mentioned colonialism. Go tell me more about this. What, you know, the COVAX, should we improve COVAX or should we go in a different direction? How is this legacy of colonialism, which the pandemic is amplifying? It's not just reinvigorating, it's just putting a spotlight on it. How is that all tied up and what should we do?
First of all, I'm definitely not the best person to speak about the effects of colonialism, but I appreciate the question. And I do think that we see a little bit of that in COVAX too, as we do with all global health institutions. I think the issue of participation has been raised many times. The engagement of civil society, in particular from the Global South, has not really been meaningful throughout the COVAX process. I think one of the main issues of COVAX is that it has just relied on the assumption that somehow it would be able to compete with high-income countries for doses, which is just, I mean, if you compare the resources, there's no chance that they could compete. And they didn't do enough on the development side of things. CEPI signed contracts with some developers, but didn't only force them to be willing to sell to COVAX, not under which conditions, not under which timelines, etc. And I think that there was a little bit of a mismatch there. And then I think there's also, they didn't do enough, and this is a repetition of a mistake that we've seen with the pneumococcal advanced market commitment, to not expand manufacturing capacity, to still rely on that monopoly-based model. It took the pneumococcal vaccine AMC 10 years to introduce just a third manufacturer for these vaccines. And it was known from the beginning that the duopoly of pneumococcal vaccines between Pfizer and GSK was an issue and was causing high prices, etc. We knew this from the beginning, but it took 10 years. And it's unfortunate that Gavi then didn't take that lesson and apply that to COVAX and set aside some money and really try and push for technology transfer, really push for more manufacturers that are independent of each other producing the same vaccines, of sharing also of intellectual property, etc. So there are a number of different steps that rely on breaking up monopolies and a more decentralized production model that unfortunately weren't used by Gavi.
Thank you. I'm going to turn now to Tian again for your comments on COVAX and whether we should be, diving into that more and helping to improve it, or different perspectives. And then also, while you have the microphone, I want to then, after that, pivot to the conversation about vaccine hesitancy, which I know that is something that you also are working on, and the idea of how we can try to ensure that we have an equitable access, and then that the folks have access and are able to confidently take up the vaccine. So over to you.
Thanks so much, Louise. Just some reflections on this discussion now around COVAX in particular. We saw from the leaked COVAX documents in December that Reuters shared that if there was ever a time not to put all of our eggs in one basket, it's now. I agree that COVAX is one player around a very big table, and we firmly say time and time again that COVAX will not result in equity. COVAX will contribute, but we don't view it, certainly in terms of a vehicle to realize universal access or eventual equity. At the outset, COVAX revealed itself by its resistance to engagement, its resistance to accountability. Several civil society groups across the world petitioned COVAX to request a seat around the table, to be privy to these discussions, to allow the lived realities of communities across the world to have meaningful input into how the operations of COVAX unfolds. COVAX has been consistently resistant to engagement and transparency. And just to repeat what I had said initially, this is an unelected, unaccountable structure. It is unelected, it is unaccountable. So we don't view COVAX with any great sense of optimism. We want to focus in terms of what we can do in our context to basically give the communities that we live in, work in, and represent, and are part of, the best chance at success. At the outset, we had listed a range of concerns with the COVAX agreement before even South Africa had signed on to it. And we actively took these and shared them with our colleagues across the region. And you found COVAX coming into countries with really stifling conditions in terms of overriding existing policies, in terms of just how COVAX set the agenda. And we've had senior government officials who would come and say to us, when it comes to COVAX, we're helpless. We don't have the power, it's take it or leave it. And that's not a sustainable solution. It's not a solution based in the principles of Ubuntu or I am because you are. There's no solidarity there. It's problematic. So having said that on COVAX, moving to your next question around vaccine hesitancy, one of the things that excites me around the work that Africa is doing to take control of its destiny through this African Vaccine Delivery Alliance is this framework for equitable access, or for equitable vaccine access. And one of the key components of that is really recognizing the importance of addressing vaccine hesitancy and the underlying understanding, which is these billions of dollars, all of the time, the effort, the science, the research that has gone into getting us to where we are today with COVID vaccines will come to absolutely nothing if those vaccines don't make it from the fridge into people's arms. Communities across this region have concerns, they have fears, they have anxieties. What we should not be doing is undermining or minimizing those under the guise of it's a pandemic, people are dying. We need to meet communities at their point of need and to recognize that in many countries, South Africa included, communities have to daily face the violence of the public health system, a system that has consistently failed them, a frail public health care system. And so it goes beyond a COVID-19 vaccine, but it's really about how do we rebuild communities' trust in a public healthcare system that has consistently let them down. And that would be a basis for building vaccine confidence. In addition, of course, to targeting high-profile individuals and leaders who spread misinformation. This year, we filed a complaint against South Africa's top judge, the Chief Justice Mogoeng, where he spread misinformation about COVID-19 vaccines. And so we took him to task, and that complaint is still with the Judicial Services Commission that will make a decision. But it's important for us at every single opportunity to hold those in power to account for what they say about vaccines and what they say about science, especially when what they say could put people's lives at risk.
Thank you so much for that. You know, here in the US, I think we certainly have vaccine hesitancy as a concern, and yet many in power are using that as a deflection tool to make excuses for really a lack of access. And I think, you know, the public health system in the US is extremely fragmented and has not really served the communities of color, Black communities, Latino communities who have been heavily impacted here, Indigenous communities. And yet now suddenly the call is, come on, get your vaccine. And the headlines are really about the hesitancy, which needs to be worked on, but is really not the whole story. Richard, to turn back to you, how is WHO working to address inequity around, whether it's around hesitancy, which is often so well-founded, and equity around distribution of vaccines within countries, especially as we have to be mindful that you know, countries within Africa or around the world are not homogenous. There's inequities within those two. Is there something that you're working on through WHO to try to ensure that?
Yeah, definitely. I think vaccine hesitancy and particularly misinformation that we have seen escalating very much, particularly with the COVID-19 vaccine, has been something of a great concern indeed. But if I step back a bit, and when we looked at the traditional vaccine routine immunization in many countries, and then even if we looked at globally, the number of people who have received at least one dose, I think there is a pretty much quite a high acceptance of vaccine in general, I think in Africa. And we have seen in countries where vaccines like measles, where community knows exactly why children are dying because the lack of vaccine, etc. Meningitis, in the meningitis belt, for instance, when there are vaccination drives, people come queue for vaccines. So there is this sort of a background platform where people understand and accept vaccine. But unfortunately for COVID-19, we've seen a completely different games. And I think all conspirational theories, maybe which could be to some extent linked to some of the issues that the different colleagues highlighted, lack of transparency, lack of the way things have been developed, and etc. And all of that has created a lot of suspicion, including, unfortunately, sometimes what we have seen in few scientists, and this is particular something on the Francophone countries in this region, where there was a huge resistance after in the media in France, for instance. There was a sort of some scientists were talking about coming and do the testing in Africa, which goes back to the issue of colonialism we're talking about, and bringing back some of the very bad memories on things. So this has not done good things for vaccination in general, but where we are hopeful, I think there is a lot of now discussion, a lot of work now is being done. We are working quite very closely with Africa CDC, for instance, in trying really to put in place support to the country. We have launched a African Infodemic Alliance to debunk some of these misinformation that we are seeing spreading on the social media. So to conclude, I will say that I have some hope, because when I've seen the resumption of routine immunization, for instance, we were kind of concerned to see that routine could potentially also be affected by this rumor around things. And yet we are seeing countries slowly going back to the same level of coverage with what we had pre-COVID in using the routine immunization. So I will be a bit cautious. There is indeed a real problem with COVID-19 vaccines, but we still have a good level of acceptance of immunization at large in many parts of the region.
Thank you. You know, one question that's come in, which I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I think is about health system strengthening. And I wanted to just reflect on the fact that, you know, pandemics in general are characterized by, you know, panic and then followed by neglect. And it's not the first pandemic. There are other pandemics that are actually still happening, but they have maybe faded from a lot of the general public's kind of consideration, but obviously not communities who are affected by them. I'm thinking about, you know, the Ebola, large Ebola outbreak in West Africa and the more recent one in DRC, and now a couple of cases reported also, and the development of vaccines and access to vaccines. It's been wonderful to see Africa CDC really and its leadership in this pandemic. And Tian, you're talking about the African Alliance, about the vaccine now. How could we collectively, perhaps, whether it's through structures or policies, try to ensure that this crisis somehow leads us to better systems, whether that's legal issues or within WHO? I'm curious how we can not just be incremental in our progress, but think about really bigger changes. Sephora, I wonder if you would like to take a stab at that question, but I welcome anybody's thoughts on that.
I'd be happy to go after Tian because I think you initially addressed the question to him.
Sure, yeah, Tian.
Sure. And I think my initial reaction is a standard one, and that is we need to be empowering civil society. We need to be empowering civil society in country, and we need to be empowering regional civil society. At the core of this remains accountability of national leadership, supported by regional solidarity. And so I think it's really, really important, whether it's about advocating for pressure to make sure that we reach a certain level of manufacturing capacity for the next pandemic, whether it's ensuring that we don't face the same issues that we face now around elected public officials being silenced by pharmaceutical companies' non-disclosure agreements. I think all of these are very specific and clearly laid out targets for civil society across the region. But of course, this is civil society that has historically been severely underfunded and under-resourced. So the call will really be to the donor community and to regional partners to ensure that civil society at its core is strengthened in order to ensure that we don't have the same discussion when the next pandemic comes. And whether that means funding legal reform, whether that means funding national advocacy roadmaps or implementation maps in terms of getting manufacturing up to speed, accountability, really looking at how we regard the roles and responsibilities of public officials in terms of their accountability to communities. I think it really starts and at the core is about communities and allowing communities to practice the agency that they have to hold those in power while keeping people dying and sick to account.
Thank you.
I think for me, there's kind of two issues. The one is that this pandemic, I think particularly in low and middle income countries, has exposed systemic problems that have existed for decades. And it's not just around healthcare systems or biomedical interventions, but it's about basic things like sanitation and good nutrition. And so I think really while we have this COVID moment where everybody is thinking about these issues, it is an opportunity we should be seizing to address these issues instead of reinforcing them, to question patent-based monopolies and dismantle them in a meaningful way when we have the political will to do so. The other thing I just wanted to touch on is around this issue of other pandemics and other epidemics, because you touched on Ebola, but the thing that I worked on prior to this pandemic was non-communicable diseases, which at the time was projected to be the leading cause of death in Africa by 2030. And we saw that with COVID, that actually there's an intersection of epidemics and diseases where people who have diabetes suffer far worse outcomes, where people who have TB are also suffering worse outcomes in COVID. And so I think we also need to think about how do we create environments, because some of these things are preventable to some extent. Like, you don't have TB spreading if people are not living in poor conditions that are overcrowded. You don't have such a high rate of non-communicable diseases if people have access to good nutrition and are not, having overexposure to alcohol and things like that. And so I think it is important, as we think about this, to not see everything in silos, to not say we're going to focus on COVID because that's the disease of the moment, but to recognize that all these things intersect, and we need to address, if we had addressed some of these other epidemics more efficiently and more effectively through interventions that sit outside the healthcare system as well as inside it, that we wouldn't have suffered such a heavy pandemic in some parts of the world. And so that's the only other thing I would flag about this.
Great, thank you. Manuel, and then I'll go back to Tian.
Thanks. Sorry, I care about this deeply, and I think the way that you framed the question is great, Louise, because I think we do indeed need to look beyond the incremental improvements we can make every time we hit some kind of global public health emergency. And I think one of those non-incremental steps would be really a strong movement away from relying on market dynamics, which are almost always antithetical to effective pandemic preparedness. No one cared about MERS virus. Nobody cared about the SARS virus until the pandemic hit, and suddenly there was market potential. But then it's too late. If you didn't have the investment into the basic research and development, into these platforms done often by the public, you wouldn't have developed the vaccine in such a short timeline. And I think in line with that, we really need to integrate pandemic preparedness into the global commons. And I think that concept of the global commons, especially in pandemic preparedness, needs to be strengthened. We heard a lot from world leaders at the beginning of the pandemic, calling global vaccination a global public good, global common good, etc. But actions didn't match that. And I think moving forward, we have to have the actions match this. And I'm talking both in terms of manufacturing, but also in terms of research and development. We should be collaborating openly. It's ridiculous that we have 3 different mRNA vaccines with 3 different thermostability capabilities, and these vaccine manufacturers aren't sharing secrets with one another. We could effectively all together respond better if they shared knowledge. And I think it's that investment into the commons which needs to be underwritten, in my opinion, by public funding. That is one of the non-incremental steps that we can take to do better next time.
Thanks. Tian, over to you. I know you wanted to comment.
Yeah, thanks. I think Sephora just got me off with, she started speaking, because I remembered one, to me, has been one of the most powerful moments of the pandemic, when at the outset, we had headlines of communities celebrating the onset of COVID, because for the first time since the end of apartheid, they had clean water. So COVID was a distant, it wasn't even an issue. It wasn't even forefront of their mind, but government was under pressure because they had to match their rhetoric of hand washing. And communities were asking, what are we washing our hands with, pray tell? And so you had these amazing visuals of these tanks rolling in to communities that had been neglected for decades, because now government had to act and match that rhetoric. So I think that was such a powerful symbolic moment that captures why we need to use this moment to strengthen systems, to strengthen accountability, and to make sure that very basic rights, not even just health rights, basic rights, we need to use this moment and capitalize on it. But it was just stunning to see communities celebrating that advent of COVID because they could have water. So to me, that just summed it up. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's a very striking story. And actually in the comments we're hearing in the chat about, creating and ensuring that we become trustworthy, we public health government. We need to demonstrate trustworthiness before we critique those who don't trust in our approach. I think, you know, the question of who is invited to the table to discuss approaches, policies, facilities, systems, which, you know, knowledge is prioritized is part of what I've learned to call, you know, the epistemic violence, which again is part of this colonial legacy in our global health system, where, you know, the types of knowledge which are academic, European, white, in large cities and not in communities, these are privileged, and often then it's used as a, whether conscious or unconscious, bias around who's actually invited to be part of the discussion. And I think it touches on all of the things we've talked about, whether it's investing in communities, investing in community health systems, investing in civil society. And it's a chronic problem that I think we really have to address as we move forward. We have about 10 minutes left in the panel. I've been answering some of the questions coming in. If the audience has any more questions, keep popping them in the Q&A. But I'd love to maybe just turn to each of you on the panel as we do that to see if have we missed any points? Is there something that you wanted to raise? Dr. Mahego had to leave us, but he had really wanted us to also touch on what are the key drivers we have to put forward. And I think we've spoken about many of those things. But if you had a minute or two to think about what would you like to do, what would you ask us to do most critically as our next steps, we can think about that for each of us as we get some last questions in from the audience. Who'd like to go on that? Sephora, maybe I'll go back to you.
There was actually a completely separate point which occurred to me when Manuel was speaking, and it was around, you know, kind of pandemic preparedness. Prior to COVID-19, the international health regulations were kind of the reigning global instrument that regulated pandemic control. And, you know, a lot of the interventions that are included in those are to some extent like a bit archaic, you know. They didn't really work that well for COVID. Things like travel bans and you know, testing at airports and you know, quarantining people if they came from certain areas actually just served to further stigmatize the virus when the pandemic began. And I was just thinking, there's been all these calls now to rethink what the international health regulations look like and to actually reform them against the pandemic. And so I think for me, a critical next step would be to think about, if the WHO is going to issue a new set of regulations, what actually should pandemic preparedness look like? It shouldn't look like how we used to do it in the 1400s when we'd keep ships outside, you know, having a yellow flag. We actually need to think a little bit differently in this globalized world. Cutting off, you know, limiting trade relations doesn't work. So what can work, and how can we leverage on international organizations like the WHO to make pandemic preparedness in a globalized world a reality? So I think that would be the next step from, you know, it's quite a broad thing, but I think as we're thinking about the next pandemic, that's like a critical step, because it didn't work this time very well, and we need to avoid that in the future.
Yeah, thank you. We had a couple of questions from participants, audience members who are in the US, and thinking about how, you know, how can we use our privilege as individuals here, as citizens here, and how, I think, can certain communities or networks here be influential. I think one thing to do is to here raise the consciousness of this. Call your representatives, call your senators. They do count up how many people have called about this issue, and do I have to pay attention to it? And we're so hyper-focused at the moment on our own problems. I think there's not enough voices raising the global concern. I'm curious though, Tian, in terms of activism and connecting people, if there's opportunity, especially in this hyper-connected world now, for activists on this side of the Atlantic to really connect more meaningfully with activism there on the ground. Do you have suggestions for us or ideas on ways to connect that way?
I mean, I think I really just want to echo what you had said. You know, what Janice had put in the chat is really, really just, it's just touching, and it's really reaffirming, you know, that despite it all, there are communities who recognize privilege and who do want to do something. And so I totally agree with you. The pressure needs to be kept on your public officials to remind them that the actions of the government are materially standing in the way of getting vaccines to those who need it. And we know we don't want to end up in the usual position of Africa being closed off. Once Africa is closed off because we haven't gotten to certain levels of vaccination, what are we then talking about? Are we then talking about vaccine passports? What does that mean for trade? What does that mean for travel? What does that mean for livelihoods, for research, for sharing, for academia? So these issues have material impacts on communities. But to circle back to also what Sephora was speaking about in terms of how do we redo pandemic readiness, I think a lesson that we need to remind ourselves of is that we cannot leave it up to the epidemiologists. We cannot leave it up to the virologists, to academia, to bureaucrats. It will end badly, or as the young people say, it will end in tears. What we need to do is we need to advocate to make sure that communities have a seat at the table, have a voice at the table, and are heard. In my view, the reason why we are in the place where we are is because we've sidelined communities from the outset. From the early COVID vaccine trials, we've sidelined communities. There were several trials run across the globe, particularly in South Africa, that did not engage communities. We didn't see a level of engagement that we see in HIV vaccine trials, for example. And it led to us, in some instances, calling for the shutdown of some COVID-19 vaccine trials, because you had researchers saying, it's not about communities right now. We need to get the vaccine. People are dying. We will consult later. And we've seen it time and time again. We've seen it with antiretrovirals. We've seen it with the microbicide ring, the vaginal ring. We've seen it with PrEP. We've seen it time and time again that unless communities are involved from the very outset, the investments, the efforts that we are making are going to come to nothing. And so it's not only a good human rights, practical, moral, ethical thing to do, it's also good business. And it's protecting and securing the investment, which the allegation is. It's all about the investment and about the dollars. So if we want to protect the dollars and the investments, that means giving communities at the table from the very outset.
Yeah, thank you. Just before I'm going to turn to Emmanuel for a word on this, just before I then pass back to Dr. Katz, I do want to acknowledge that we're very privileged to have our guests joining us from the African continent. And of course, we're having a dialogue especially about that experience. And there's so many other communities around the world who are also in similar situations, whether it's in the Caribbean, where I'm usually working, Latin America, and the Middle East. We have, you know, Palestinians who are not able to receive vaccine despite Israel being held up as such a great, you know, distribution of the vaccine. So there's many, many issues. And I want to ensure our audience members that we are mindful of all of that, but are tapping in right now to all of the lived experience of those who are on the space with us. So Manuel, I'll pass to you for just a last word on this, and then I'll be handing it back to Dr. Katz to close us out as we come to the bottom of the hour.
Thank you. I think what I'll say is that I'd like to reemphasize the issue that a pandemic is a collective problem of the world and therefore needs collective solutions. And I think as part of that, we need to acknowledge also who are the winners of pandemics, because there are winners. They have names like Amazon, they have names like Pfizer, and they need to do more to support those who are really suffering the consequences from the pandemics. And I think for better or for worse, it's currently governments that are in the driving seat that have the power to really force this to happen. And in doing so, I think we as citizens both have the responsibility to question our governments on whether they are doing this, but also to question existing power structures. And I mean that both historically and current. We need to, I think, question why, again, high-income country governments are in the driving seat when it comes to our initiatives such as COVAX, but we also need to acknowledge the historical roots of distrust and and just historical inequities between high-income countries and developing countries, and indeed colonialism. And I think that needs to be more part of the conversations when we plan for future pandemics.
What a privilege to be in this space with all of you. Thank you so much for this conversation and discussion. I feel like we could go on forever, but I'll get in trouble. So I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Katz. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ivers. That concludes the first webinar in our new virtual event series. Thank you so much to our panelists and our moderator for such a wonderful and deeply engaging conversation. And thank you to Dr. Mahego for your reflective remarks. We are so grateful for your time. This was a deeply engaging and critical conversation. To our audience, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again at our second part of this series on Thursday, April 8th. Our second webinar is entitled Building Vaccine Confidence, Global Trends and Practical Solutions. Registration's open, and you can find the link to register in the chat and also at the Harvard Global Health Institute website. I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon or evening wherever you are in the world. Thank you again for attending today.